Some women can no longer hide who they really are, and men who pay attention are finally starting to see it. Just yesterday, I came across a short clip, nothing dramatic, just a woman casually talking while doing her makeup. She said, "If a man can't give me what I want instantly, I don't have the time to wait." She laughed, shrugged, and kept blending her foundation, never realizing that those few seconds revealed far more than she intended. That's the thing. It wasn't the words. It was the ease, the comfort, the total lack of awareness that her mask had slipped. And once you notice this kind of moment, you start seeing it everywhere. Men today aren't imagining things. They're catching the little flashes, the tone shift, the entitlement, the casual disregard, the instant mood swing when something doesn't go their way. These tiny reactions used to be hidden behind politeness, behind effort, behind the need to impress. Not anymore. Life is revealing people faster than they can pretend stress reveals them. Disappointment reveals them. Attention reveals them. Comfort reveals them. And here's the truth you already feel but couldn't put into words. Some women aren't being exposed, they're exposing themselves. So stay with me, because once you understand why this is happening, your entire perspective on modern behavior is going to shift permanently. Before we go any deeper, we need one core idea to frame everything: emotional debt. Emotional debt is simple. It's the cost someone creates through their unresolved past and the expectation that someone else will pay for it. And today, a lot of women aren't hiding that debt anymore. They're broadcasting it without even realizing it. There was a time when these patterns stayed private. The resentment, the fear of abandonment, the need for validation, the expectation that a man must fix what someone else broke. These things used to stay behind closed doors, but now it's all out in the open. You see it in the little micro moments. A woman recording herself saying, "You need to heal me if you want to be with me." Or one who blames every mood shift on the man she's dating, or the one who demands emotional labor before offering basic respect. They don't realize these tiny sentences reveal the entire story: the debt, the weight, the expectations they're quietly carrying and trying to hand off. And if you stay with me, I'll show you the patterns behind this. Why it's happening, how to recognize the signs, and what a man should do once he sees the truth behind the mask. What you're noticing today isn't random. It isn't a coincidence. There are system-level forces that have made it almost impossible for certain women to hide who they truly are. First, there's the attention economy, a world where every thought, emotion, and impulse can be rewarded instantly. Validation has become public approval is something people ask for on the outside, not something they build on the inside. And when your value feels tied to eyes on a screen, you start revealing parts of yourself you would have kept private. Second, there's the cultural shift. Casualized intimacy, therapy language being used without the healing, victimhood turned into a type of social currency. People have learned the vocabulary of growth without doing the work of growth, and then you see it in everyday life. A client once told me about a woman who said, "I've been hurt so much, the next man must prove I'm safe." She wasn't asking, she was demanding repayment for a debt he didn't create. Another woman posted, "If I get upset, it's your job to regulate me." These aren't slips, they're broadcasts of internal patterns. This is the mechanism. The structure of modern life pushes the truth to the surface. What used to stay hidden now reveals itself effortlessly. To understand why some women can't hide anymore, you need to understand emotional debt at a deeper level, because this is where everything begins. Emotional debt forms quietly. A breakup that was never processed, a betrayal she never recovered from, a childhood wound she never looked at. Years of validating the same patterns without ever questioning them. All of it stacks up, like financial debt, until the weight has to fall somewhere. And when she enters a new relationship, that debt doesn't disappear, it transfers. Not consciously, not maliciously, but automatically. This is why men experience something they can't explain. The moment things start getting serious, she begins asking for emotional repayment that has nothing to do with him. Reassurance for insecurities another man created. Patience for wounds he never caused. Support for patterns she refuses to confront. A man I spoke with recently told me, "She started trauma dumping on the third date. I barely knew her, but somehow I became responsible for everything her ex did." He wasn't dating her. He was inheriting her emotional debt. And that's the real consequence. Men become the cleanup crew, expected to fix, soothe, stabilize, and heal what someone else broke, while pretending it's normal. Once you understand this debt, the mask slipping finally makes sense. There's a difference between having legitimate emotional needs and having entitlement. A legitimate need is healthy. I want a partner who communicates. I want honesty. I want stability. These are human, reasonable, grounded. But entitlement is something else entirely. Entitlement says you must heal what someone else damaged. You must carry the weight I refuse to deal with. You must validate me constantly or you're the problem. This isn't connection, it's expectation without accountability. Men are seeing this more clearly now because the behaviours are slipping into the open. A woman will publicly post, "If I get triggered, it's my man's job to fix me." That's bare minimum. She thinks she's sharing vulnerability, but what she's really sharing is entitlement. The belief that her emotional world must be managed externally. That's how imbalance starts. One person gives endlessly. The other person sees that giving as a requirement, not a gift, and the result is predictable. Resentment from the man who's carrying emotional weight that was never his. Frustration from the woman who expects constant soothing. A dynamic where one partner becomes the caretaker and the other becomes the centre of gravity. This is the quiet cost of entitlement. It turns a relationship into a one-sided obligation. There's another layer to why some women can't hide anymore: validation addiction. Modern life runs on a dopamine loop, a simple cycle that goes post, attention, validation, repeat. At first, it's harmless. A compliment here, a like there, but the brain adapts. It needs more stimulation, more eyes, more approval to feel the same hit. And once validation becomes a habit, behaviour shifts. Suddenly, she expects attention, not just from her partner, but from multiple orbiters, from strangers, from anyone watching. This creates a quiet conflict. She wants exclusive loyalty from him, while keeping a public pipeline of attention open for herself. You see it in micro-examples every day. The partner who insists she's committed, yet still posts thirst traps under the label of self-expression, confidence, or my body, my choice. But the intention is clear, it feeds the loop, and here's the problem men face. You can't satisfy someone who's addicted to external validation. One partner can't compete with a crowd. And when attention becomes oxygen, the relationship becomes secondary. This is why the mess slips. Validation addiction always reveals itself. When emotional debt, entitlement, and validation addiction combine, certain behavioural tactics start to appear. Not because someone is evil, but because these strategies work in the short term. And if you don't know what you're looking at, you end up trapped in them without realising it. The first tactic is early trauma dumping, sharing an entire life story within the first few conversations. It sounds vulnerable, but the real function is emotional fast-tracking, a way to make you feel responsible before trust has even been built. Next is manufactured drama as a test, a sudden tone shift, an emotional spike, a small conflict created out of nothing. The purpose? To see whether you'll chase, apologise, and prove your willingness to accommodate her moods. Then comes weaponized victimhood. If you set a boundary, she becomes hurt. If you pull back, you're cold. If you say no, you're unsafe. The strategy here is simple. Reframe accountability as cruelty, so she never has to change. Another pattern is triangulation, bringing in another person's attention or approval to create pressure, mentioning an ex's effort, quoting a male friend's opinion, posting something suggestive right after a disagreement. The goal isn't cheating, it's leverage. All these tactics have functions. They create emotional leverage, secure attention, and shift responsibility away from the person using them. And here's the important part. These are patterns, not identities, not who she is, but behaviours she may rely on when she doesn't want to face her own emotional debt. Once you can spot these strategies, the entire dynamic begins to make sense. If you really want to understand who someone is, you don't study their big speeches. You study the small signals, the moments where the mask slips without warning, And today, a lot of men are finally learning to read these micro reveals. One of the clearest signals is constant thirst posting while claiming monogamy. The captions say, "taken," but the content says, "I still need external attention." That contradiction tells you everything. Another mask drop happens when she talks about her exes as villains every single time. One bad relationship is understandable, but 5 identical stories? That's a pattern. And patterns reveal accountability issues more than the stories themselves. Then there's the classic, "I'm healing," said repeatedly for months or years with no behavioural change, no boundaries, no growth, just the slogan of healing without the evidence of it. Watch for push-pull behaviour too. Warm one day, distant the next. Affectionate when it's convenient. Cold when she wants leverage. Inconsistency is one of the biggest mask drop moments because emotional stability can't be faked for long. Here are a few more real-world micro-examples men are noticing. She flirts publicly, but expects you to stay silent. She preaches boundaries, but violates yours instantly. She wants commitment while keeping all her escape routes open. These aren't accidents. These are data points. Small signals that reveal the truth far earlier than words ever will. You've seen the micro-signals. You've seen how small behaviours reveal the truth long before the relationship becomes serious. Now let's make this real. Here are 3 stories, simple, everyday situations, showing exactly how these patterns play out in real life. Mark met her during a slow, uncertain season of his life. She appeared soft-spoken, sweet, and deep. In the beginning, she talked about her past gently. Just hints of old wounds, nothing alarming. But within weeks, the small signals became obvious. Late-night messages about breakdowns, constant references to her ex, and sudden, emotional spirals that Mark felt responsible to solve. He didn't realise it then, but he wasn't her partner. He was her emotional emergency kit. Every time she was overwhelmed, she ran to him, not to grow, but to discharge her emotional debt. Eventually, Mark noticed he was exhausted, resentful, and always on standby. The lesson? If you become someone's therapist early, you'll never be their partner later. Jamal dated a woman who looked incredibly self-aware online. Every week she posted quotes about healing, accountability, and doing the inner work. But off-camera, the patterns were the same, blaming others, escaping responsibility, and repeating old behaviour despite the performance. The microsignal he missed early on: she only talked about growth publicly, never practiced it privately. When conflict came, she shifted into victim mode instantly. Screenshots of lessons learned, but zero follow-through. Her growth existed only in captions, not choices. Jamal finally realised he was dating a brand, not a person. The lesson: real growth is boring, private, and consistent, not aesthetic. Daniel met a woman who said she wanted stability, maturity, and a serious relationship. She used all the right language, but her actions never aligned. She kept multiple guys in her DMs just in case, posted thirst traps for reassurance, and got defensive whenever Daniel brought up boundaries. The micro-signal he ignored early: constant attention-seeking framed as, "I'm just expressive." Over time, Daniel realised she didn't want commitment, she wanted options, and he was only one of them. The lesson: you can't build exclusivity with someone who is addicted to external validation. Projection is one of the most damaging patterns showing up in modern relationships, and it's happening more openly than ever. Projection means taking your own wounds, fears, and unresolved issues and assigning them to someone else. Instead of saying, "I'm hurt," the person says, "You hurt me." Instead of admitting, "I don't trust because of my past," they say, "You're giving me reasons not to trust you." You've probably seen the classic examples. If you ask a genuine question, you're controlling. If you set a boundary, you're toxic. If you don't tolerate disrespect, you're emotionally unavailable. If you notice inconsistencies, you're insecure. Every attempt to have an honest conversation becomes flipped back onto the man. This accountability gap blocks any chance of real growth, because as long as someone points the finger outward, they never look inward. The problem isn't the partner. The problem becomes the mirror. The moment reality reflects something they don't want to face. And the cost? Men end up in relationships where they're constantly defending themselves against issues they didn't create. The next partner inherits the same emotional debt. The cycle continues because the person never meets their own patterns. They only blame someone else for triggering them. Projection protects the ego, but it destroys the relationship. In every dating market, there's a simple truth most people don't want to hear. Your past behavior shapes your future leverage. Not morally, not emotionally, just economically. Like any marketplace where value changes over time based on supply, demand, and long-term reliability. In youth, many women gain immense leverage from attention. Their short-term desirability is at its peak. Likes, DMs, invites, options. That's why attention-driven tactics, validation loops, casual flings, constant orbiters, seem to work so well early on. But these strategies don't build long-term relational value. They burn bright, but they don't last. Over time, the dating market shifts from short-term interest to long-term investment. Men start looking not for excitement, but for stability, peace, emotional maturity, and partnership. And this is where the wall comes in. Not as an insult, but as an unavoidable transition point where the market stops rewarding temporary attraction and starts evaluating deeper traits. For anyone who relied solely on attention economics, this shift can feel brutal. The tactics that once worked, thirst posting, keeping orbiters, living off validation, stop producing commitment. The market recalibrates. Leverage moves toward people who actually invested in emotional health, self-awareness, and relationship skills. It's not punishment, it's simply how long-term selection works. Attention gets you options, but character determines who stays. The consequence is straightforward. When the leverage shifts, those who built nothing beyond short-term attraction often find themselves unprepared for long-term connection. Over the last few years, men have quietly started changing the way they date, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. After seeing the same behavioural patterns play out online and in their social circles, many men now use pattern reading as their first line of defence. They scan social media, notice posting habits, check how someone speaks about exes, and listen to what mutual friends say. It's not paranoia, it's self-protection shaped by experience. As a result, male standards are rising. More men refuse to play the role of the unpaid therapist, the emotional fixer, or the validation machine. They've learned that stepping into those roles only leads to resentment and imbalance. Today, men walk away much earlier. If they see repeated signals, constant thirst posting, unresolved trauma framed as someone else's job, love bombing followed by chaos, they simply opt out before getting attached. Not angrily, not dramatically, just quietly. This isn't avoidance, it's healthy boundary setting. Men are learning that it's better to leave early than to stay and slowly lose self-respect. And with more men valuing peace, emotional stability, and reciprocity, the dating dynamic is shifting. Commitment is no longer given by default. It's earned through consistent behaviour, not promises. It's important to say this clearly. These patterns don't describe everyone. There are many women and many men who are genuinely doing the work. They sit with their past instead of outsourcing it. They take responsibility, set boundaries, and avoid using relationships as emotional debt relief. These people exist, and they're proof that growth is possible when someone chooses honesty over performance. There are also rare but powerful examples of partners who actually grow. Someone who once struggled with validation may later build real stability. Someone who used to trauma dump may learn emotional regulation and accountability. Change isn't common, but it does happen, and it deserves recognition. This entire breakdown isn't a blanket judgment. It's a description of behavioural patterns that are becoming more visible, not a claim about all women or all relationships. Acknowledging nuance doesn't weaken the argument, it makes it real. If there's one thing men need today, it's a clear playbook, something practical, not theoretical. Here's what actually works. 1. Study behaviour, not words. Look at how she acts when no performance is required, her social posts, how she speaks about past partners, and whether she takes accountability. Words are flexible, patterns aren't. 2. Set early boundaries. Define what you tolerate and what you won't. Then observe. Does she respect those boundaries consistently, or only when it benefits her? 3. Don't become unpaid therapy. You can support someone, But you cannot fix years of emotional debt they refuse to handle themselves. If you start feeling like a counsellor, step back. 4. Don't confuse empathy with enabling. Caring is healthy. Carrying someone's entire emotional load is not. 5. Ask specific questions early, not interrogations. Clarity. What steps have you taken to heal? Are you in therapy? What have you learned from past relationships? Real answers reveal real maturity. 6. Look for sustained evidence of change. Not inspirational quotes, not dramatic confessions, consistent behaviour over time. 7. Have a walk-away script ready. Keep it calm, direct, and non-negotiable. I'm not the right person for this dynamic. I wish you well, but I'm stepping away. This isn't about being cold, it's about protecting your energy, your time, and your future. At the end of all this, the core truth remains simple. Some women can no longer hide who they really are. The masks that used to stay on for months now slip within days. Patterns that were once kept private are now visible in every story, every reaction, every small inconsistency, and the men who pay attention, they're finally seeing the full picture. But this isn't a warning meant to create fear. It's a reminder. You don't have to carry burdens you didn't create. You don't have to enter relationships blind. You don't have to fix someone who refuses to fix themselves. You don't owe your time, energy, or emotional stability to anyone who treats you like a replacement therapist instead of a partner. So here's your next step. Raise your standards, protect your peace, and start choosing people whose actions match their words. If you've seen these patterns in your life, share your story in the comments. Someone else will learn from it. And if you disagree, speak up too. The conversation matters. Because the final line is the one you must carry with you. Don't pay for damage you didn't create.